Welcome to Indian Polity Lectures. So we are discussing the Charter Act of 1813. This is okay. So we have completed other laws and acts. So let's start with Charter Act of 1813. There are basically three Charter Act: 1813, 33, and 53. So you have to remember the difference, because see, whenever there are similar things, UPSC can ask question from those areas, because these are similar Charter Act, because the name is same, only the date is different. So UPSC can pick up certain point from an act and mention it in another act, so you can become confused. So you need to focus here with more detail. Okay, so you need to apply more focus here. So Charter Act of 1813, the first provision is that abolish the trade monopoly of the company in India. So what do you mean by trade monopoly? See, the British East India Company in 1600 was given a charter. See, we are discussing Charter Act. So what do you mean by charter? See, charter is kind of a document. It's like a permit. For example, let's say you want to attempt UPSC civil services. So your admit card is like a charter to enter the examination hall. So similarly, this charter was issued by the Queen to the East India Company, British East India Company, to have trade with India. So in 1600 it was done, but it was a trade monopoly. Monopoly means only British East India Company could have trade relation with India. No other company would perform trade operation in India. No other company could engage in trade with India. So this was the trade monopoly. So this trade monopoly was ended, was abolished, except trade in tea and trade with China. It means the trade monopoly of company was abolished, but two things two things was left with the company, that is trade in tea and China. So you can remember it like this: chai and China. In Hindi we say chai and China. So except chai and China, other trade monopolies were abolished. So in this way you can remember. Allowed the Christian missionaries for spread of Western education. Okay, so this is another point. Activities of Napoleon forced British companies and merchants to diversify their trade away from Europe. Hence, the weighted end of East India Company's monopoly over Indian trade. So, what was happening? That, see, we are discussing history. So, in history, so many events all over the world, they are interconnected. So, this point is mentioning something about world history. So what was happening, again the basic detail, that at that point of time, the Napoleon, in your Germany Italy area, in world history we will discuss it in great detail, that what was happening, these European countries, they were fighting among themselves. So because of Napoleon, the companies in Britain, they were having so many problems. They could not perform their trade operations in those areas, in the areas of Europe. So they forced the government in Britain so that they can have trade with other countries also. But only the East India Company was having the monopoly. So that's why the monopoly was ended, so that the other companies can also have trade with other countries. So this is the reason. In this context, Charter Act ended companies' monopoly in trade with India. It means now other companies could also have trade relation with India. What was the significance? The regulation made by the Council of Madras, Bombay, Calcutta were now required to be laid before the British Parliament. The constitutional position of British territories in India was thus explicitly defined for the first time. So what does it mean? See, there were councils. What do you mean by council? Certain bodies was there in Madras, Bombay and Calcutta. See, in our first act, 1773, we have seen that the governor of Bengal was made superior to the governor of Madras and Bombay. Now the governor was having a body called council. In that council certain members was there. What was the purpose of those members or that council? To make certain rules and regulations. Now those regulations were now required to be laid before British Parliament. It means before 1833 or 1813 we are discussing Charter Act of 1813. It means before this act, before 1833, whatever rules these councils were making, they were not discussed in Britain. But now these things or these laws and rules and regulation made in India has to be laid down or has to be discussed in Britain. This was the significance. Again, these are all factual details. So the constitutional position explicitly defined. It means, what do you mean by constitutional position? See, the constitutional position of British territories explicitly defined. It means that, see, right till now, anything related to the councils, anything related to the working of councils were not discussed, because if you see in any act, no provision is talking about the councils, but in this act the provision is talking about the council. So for the first time, because the work of council is to make rules and regulation, and similarly the work of constitution is also the same, having rules and regulation laws. So this constitutional position was for the first time explicitly defined, because it made certain provision related to the council. Okay. Next is Charter Act of 1833. Another name for this is Saint Helena Act. So it can again come as a factual detail in your prelims. It brought about the final step of centralization. This is another keyword for your prelims, that which act brought the final step, which was in the direction of final step of centralization. Governor General of Bengal as the Governor General of India. So now we have already seen that Governor General of Bengal was made superior to other governors. Now the same Governor General of Bengal was made Governor General of India. So again his position was increased from Governor General of Bengal to Governor General of India. Who was the first? William Bentinck. So again it can come as a factual detail. Next point is, deprived the governor of Bombay and Madras of their legislative powers. Again another factual detail. Governor General of India was given exclusive legislative powers for the entire British India, because for now, right now, he is called as Governor General of India. So it is obvious that he would be having legislative powers for entire India. It is another provision. Laws made under the previous act were called regulations. Now they were called as act. Again, this is another point, that now anything or any law made in the council, it is treated as a act, but earlier they were treated as regulations only. See, what is the difference in act and regulation? See, a general difference is that when you violate the act, there are penalties in the form of certain punishment. But regulation, when you violate, there can be or cannot be punishment for regulation. But act, in the act, if you violate, there is punishment. Okay, this is the difference. Ended commercial activity of East India Company. It means the commercial activity was ended. Now it became purely administrative body. So now the entire commercial activity of that company was in the hand of the British government. Earlier the commercial function was in the hand of East India Company, but there was control by the British government. But right now the activities was ended and they were completely under the control of British government. Okay, India's first law commission was set up as Macaulay is chairman. So again another factual detail. Attempted to introduce a system of open competition for selection of civil servant. See, these all are factual details. Now the reason for this is that open competition. Why these Britishers are introducing open competition? So the obvious reason is that somewhere the Indians right now they are demanding that we also be part of administration. This only be the reason. Second reason can be that if the Britishers they include Indians in their administrative body, what would happen that it would be easier for them to manage India, isn't it? Because the Indians know about their own country more than the Britishers, so it would be easier for the Britishers to manage India and their affairs. So this was the reason. What was the significance? Act created for the first time Government of India having authority over entire territorial area possessed by the British in India. So because Governor General of India was created, whatever law he made, that was for entire India. So entire territory India was also under the control of British. This act further led to the centralization of administration in British India. So further centralization happened. Okay. Next is the Charter Act of 1853. It separated for the first time legislative and executive function of Governor General's Council. It means till now the council that we have already discussed in our previous lecture, that the council was performing certain functions, but in this act the legislative function executive function was separated. It means certain body would perform legislative function and other body would perform executive function. We have already seen what is the meaning of these. Legislative function means making of law, executive means implementing of laws. Okay, the separate Governor General's Legislative Council came to be known as Indian Central Legislative Council. This is the starting of our Indian Parliament kind of thing. Okay, so the legislative function was separated, so Legislative Council came to be known as Indian Legislative Council. A law to be promulgated needed the assent of the Governor General. Just like right now, see, whenever a law is passed, the president has to give his assent, his or her assent. Similarly, earlier also in modern Indian history time, the assent of Governor General was there. See, assent is nothing but kind of a signature or a approval kind of thing by the president, and that time by the Governor General. The Governor General could veto any bill. What do you mean by veto? Again, in president is a separate topic. Right now the basic understanding is that veto means governor can withhold his or her assent. It means it will not, it will or it will not give his or her assent. Means it will not decide, just it will, he will keep, he will keep the bill laying, he will keep the bill before him, just laying down, not doing anything, not giving approval, not disapproving it, just keeping it idle. Okay, not reacting on it. This is the meaning of veto. So there are different types of veto, and this is one of them, that the Governor General or the President is not doing anything over the bill. He is not accepting it, he is not rejecting it, he is not approving, not giving assent or giving assent. So there are so many types, different types of vetoes. We will discuss it in detail in other lectures when we discuss the topic of President. Introduced an open competition system of selection, recruitment of civil servants. Macaulay Committee was set up to recommend for enforcing the same in 1854. So we have seen that in 1833 also this is there, open competition for. So the provision was there, but it was not implemented, attempted, because the wording says attempted. See, this is how UPSC plays. Thus, you have to really be thorough with the keywords. You have to really understand the concept and keywords, that what is the meaning. It attempted to introduce. It means in reality it did not happen. It only attempted. But in reality it happened in 1853. Okay. that open competition happened in 1853. It introduced for the first time local representation in Indian Legislative Council. What do you mean by local representation? It means Indian were also part of the council. Earlier they were not the part of the Governor General's council. Right now they were also made, certain number of people was also made the part. Okay. What was the significance? For the first time, legislation was treated as a special function of the government, because we have seen that legislative function was separated from the executive function. So this was seen as a special function requiring special machinery and special process. The covenanted civil service was thrown open to Indians also. It means it happened in reality on the ground. In 1833, the act attempted to introduce, but it was introduced in 1853. That too not in 1853 but after. Now, the British Crown's rule. So why we have seen that earlier it was company rule, now it is Crown rule. So what happened in 1858 we will see in the next class.